So there's an area of potential creativity that lies behind that, both on an individual level, and where we apply to it, the small area, we have to apply broadly everywhere, is the rule. It's a rule which seems common sense, that the law of nature is constant everywhere, but it's something picked up by a man like Einstein, who had some thought experiments and found it applies here, it must apply everywhere. So he had something like general relativity, and so far he's being proved to be correct. Predicting that there are gravitational waves, just a theory, but now, very recently, I think it was a few years ago now, we found two black holes colliding, and they can pick up with very, very fine interferometers the waves that we call gravitational waves. So in that same way, we have this potential quiescence which is there, a potential of immense creativity. If we were able to tap into that consciously, we would change our world completely. And the process to do that would be meditation. To use meditation in this way, to use that poised area of potential creativity and see, can I now take the thought which is now generated as a current and manipulate it consciously to create something that is not only inwardly joyful, but also creates a joyful effect all around me, to everybody who contacts me, to everybody who was and is entangled with me, and to the whole cosmos, since the cosmos is only one. We can understand a man sitting in a cave and making these conscious, wonderful, noble thoughts, repeating them with great resolve, meditating, praying, changes the whole world. It's not that a person is doing nothing. Very often one criticism of monastic hermit life is it's a waste of time. They're not doing anything, or they're doing enormous amount. Their thought is being carried out in the world, because all this world is generated from the creative force that we call thought. And what we call creator is a cosmic mind that has this capacity to think, and its thought becomes this universe. And we mistake it for a localized you and me and this and that. So meditation is getting back, doing the reverse of it, starting off from where we are, from a common theme, from a coarse theme, from a rough area of what we see, from where consciousness flows through the sense organs to the sense objects. We start there, and we go back subtly, level by level, layer by layer, until we find that area where we can't go any further, and there we find our inward bliss. And then when the mind goes outward again, when intention loses its steadiness, then we can go up, back again, and take another theme and go inwards, like that, inward and outward. There's something that we call the Sri Yantra. It's a combination of interwoven triangles. And if it represents the feminine aspect, that is the Shakti, the energy of the universe, then of course the triangle inwardly is downward, and if it's the other way around, it's upward. But in any event, there's a small bindu or point in the center. The purpose of it is to understand that there's an evolutionary and involutionary movement in it. We can go from the outside toward the inside, from the inside toward the outside, and we have covered the ground of the whole creation. So we should not think that we have an individual mind, and when we ask about the subconscious, we should not put a my on it. We should not put an ownership area on it. We should take it and say, there's a universality about it, and in this localized area, all my experiences I put into a memory bank. It is that memory bank that will have its effect on this localized area and make an individual behavior. And it's that behavior which will affect what we now call an individual, from an individual point of view, which we now call my freedom, my clearer thinking, my revelation, my discovery. But when we discover it, we discover that which is there for all time, everywhere present, and this we call Brahman. So your question is about the relationship between subconscious and Brahman. There it is. We have to think that there is this entity that doesn't change, doesn't evolve, doesn't have parts, and yet its presence, you find its glory everywhere. By picking up and tuning into that glory everywhere, seeing it everywhere, then we elevate the mind, we cleanse the mind, and put it in such a condition that that inward revelation occurs by itself. That's the process. So this 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is entirely to do with that process. And as we were studying it, maybe now a few weeks old now, we discovered that it doesn't start with sitting. It starts with changing your behavior, reforming your habit level, called the subconscious, and doing that from the conscious area and playing it like a game with a sporting attitude. So somebody asked me yesterday, the problem is all these, desires, what can we do? How can we deal with them? And my answer was, controlling is a difficult word, because sometimes the word control will infer repression. But we can use the word control in a different sense. We control a car. It doesn't mean to say we squash it or repress its tendencies. We just are able to see and observe acutely when the car is veering off to one side, we correct it. And not only that, but we have an unconscious controlling aspect to it. That is, before we know it, we've reacted. We react automatically. We have learned to have an inbuilt involuntary behavior. When a threat is there, we take evasive action. We do it very quickly. Within a split seconds, we do it. If we're distracted for a prolonged period of time, that aspect of it lapses and we could get into an accident. That's a difficulty. So attention is the main thing. When we are able to take our attention and elevate it continuously to the highest point means the noblest point, the point that has the maximum generosity of spirit, the point that has all the virtues of nobility and truth and goodness and love and harmony. When we do that continuously, then the mind becomes controlled. But there's nothing to stop us from doing it in a sporting way. Surely we should do it that way. Surely we should take it as in an adventurous spirit. Surely we should say, we know why we're doing this, and we know what it will lead to. And since life can be philosophically viewed in this way as a kind of sport or a game, why don't we also enter this game of guiding thought as well? Why don't we take these thoughts and manipulate them to transform them into the highest form that we can, making the highest world, creating the highest environment for us, the best environment, not only for us, but for everybody. As soon as we put in for us, of course, it's no longer for everybody and it's no longer the highest. So all these thoughts will have no sense of first person singular and no future tense either. What is the key in meditation? 2 rules: no first person singular and no future tense. So before you even sit, that is made very clear. So I put it up on the board here. Self-effort and self-reliance is the first port of call that we have to visit for meditation. Self-reliance means we don't blame anybody else for our misfortune, not even Mr. Trump. What we'll do is we'll be self-reliant. Our own effort will make us our own best friend or our own worst enemy. It's entirely up to us. The enemy side of it is disguised. We think that pleasure is something that is there to avoid pain and will sustain us in life. And as long as we veer toward that and try maximize that, then the painful side of it, the fearful side of it, will be left off. But that's not a very good formula, because the causal relationship is like a wave. The cause of a peak is a hollow, and the cause of the hollow is a peak. And so we go through a seesaw, a pair of opposites, pain and pleasure, pain, pleasure, pain, pleasure, a kind of syndrome, and we never get out of it. And we get frustrated, but we still repeat the old habits. How to get out of the old habits? We have to revalue things and change our conscious response. So that's self-effort. Only we can do this. And self-reliance. We only can rely on ourselves and deal with this world, which after all, I don't know if you ever remember, when I was a child, we learned this, and I'm sure you know it. It's very popular. But it struck me, even when I was small, as very, very funny and very profound. As I was going up the stair, I met a man that wasn't there. He wasn't there again today. I wish that man would go away. You never heard it before? It's a very common thing. I don't know who's attributed it to, but we learned it when I was small, you see. This is the world that we live in, you see. There's a paradox to it. As I was going up the stair, I met a man who wasn't there. He wasn't there again today. I wish that man would go away. I'm surprised you don't know. Anyhow, the next thing, of course, in the meditation process, according to the 6th chapter, is perfection. Perfection in yoga. That is perfection in concentration. And that leads to us to see the self in all, and all beings in the self. Self meaning, you see, you can say God in everyone, and everyone in God. You can use that language instead. But perfection in yoga is that, seeing the self in all, and all beings in the self. Imagine now what a transformed world that would be if that occurred. That comes out of the depth of meditation, and it also has a prerequisite to it. So that when we sit, we no longer growl at God. We now take all our impressions, everything that we think would be good material, to guide our attention inwardly to that point, that source of inward poise and bliss.
Can you just say, Swamiji, I've heard, this saying that Jesus said, love your enemies. I recently heard it said that he never said that because he's no concept of an enemy. He doesn't.
No, it's quite possibly said that, because any good teacher will try and phrase everything in language that we understand. So while philosophically we may say it's not possible for him to say that, of course, yes. There'll be and also he's using language of the Old Testament as well that people will understand. But yes, people do unfortunately have enemies. Should they have enemies if they adopt this philosophy? No. Exactly. And yet, from the human level, we have people who are for us, people who are against us, and so on. We can clearly see that. And but that's part of it. In a pantomime, there are people that we should boo at, isn't it?
People we should what?
Boo. Isn't it? The drama is set like that. The pantomime comes on. There's the hero or the heroine. And the hero is always played by a woman. I don't know why. And then the dame, the humor is there, always played by a man. So all kinds of cross-gender mixes come across in pantomime. And there are people who are the villains. We boo and hiss. And those who are the hero, the heroic type. And there we like those and we cheer those. And there's always a chorus at the back. You see all of these things? Yeah?
It's called life.
It is. Absolutely it is. But do we take it like that? That's the thing. So here's somebody who plays for fun.
Great fun.
Yeah. And arrives with stitches.
Have you all in stitches?
and is going to get beaten up for the World Cup.
If I'm picked, yeah.
So interesting. But long ago, you see, I would have said, knowing that you played rugby, and I would have said, so take life in that same way. You don't ask that there's no opposition players. What kind of game is that if there's nothing? If there are no enemies, what kind of game is it? Just take it as a game. And who wins, who loses? You can be very brutal on the field, but afterwards everybody shakes their hands, drinks, and so on and so forth afterwards. It's a very great social thing. Good sportsmanship is there. What a wonderful thing sport is. Sport itself is such a unifying thing within the world, be it soccer or anything else sometimes. But if you play it, it is a game. It's not the end of the world if you lose. You may have a fantastic victory when you win and so on, but by the same token, you'll feel sorry for the opposition who didn't win. And you're all in the same boat because you all received the same knocks. Imagine now a game like that. No field, no players, no ball, nobody gets hurt. No. So we enter into the game and play the game very well. Knowing that it is a game with that kind of attitude, we play the game very well. The fate of the imperfect yogi is also brought up in this chapter. So now we've spoken a lot. We only have 10 minutes. So I'll do probably one stanza and pick it up next week also. So where we left off really was Chidatmana prashantasya paramatma samahita shitoshna sukhadukekshu tatta mana pamana yo. Self-disciplined and serene man's supreme self is consistent in cold and heat, pleasure and pain, also honor and dishonor. We covered this also last week. The mind that delights in its communion with God detaches itself easily from sense pleasure. So in answer to the question, what will I do with all these desires and so on and so forth? It's very difficult to control these and so on. There Sri Ramakrishna himself provides this answer and says, the mind that delights in its communion with God, it's not that you are ever separate, but the sense that you realize this oneness detaches easily from sense pleasure because by comparison, it is very, very shallow. It's very insipid by comparison. Why would you do it? Like a child's toy, you wouldn't play with it now. You leave it off. Other children can play, no problem. When we become childish, not childlike, childish, the requirement is for us to be childlike, but not childish. Any deviation would be childish. This is how the devotees get themselves emancipated, how they get themselves free, not by directly attacking, not by saying, I'm sinful, I have to deal with it. Not by telling a psychologist all your difficulties and problems and woes and assuming that something is wrong with you. We discussed this on the weekend during the Enneagram because we were discussing different psychological approaches. And I was a little brutal with somebody who was studying and well-versed in Western psychology. In fact, it's their job. I said, you have to forget all that. To forget all that. Why? Because you're starting off from an erroneous position that something is wrong. We don't start off with something is wrong. We start off with everything is full and free and perfect. Lord of the universe is standing there, seeing the self in all beings in the self. Why don't we make that our starting point? Why should we make a starting point? Poor me, I am defective. And some theologians will emphasize that too. Well, your starting point, I am a sinner. Very repeatedly, I'm a sinner, makes you a sinner. And then look at that, fear. Fear is the opposite of love in the sense that how can a loving God create fear in you? Now, sometimes we use the term fear in a different sense, of course. Out of fear of him, the wind blows and so on. That stanza is also there. But it's meant in a different way. What is meant is, out of the fact that that entity is there, all these other things inevitably have to happen. There's no other choice. So why start off from this negative position? We're born with a defect. Instead of a joy of birth, which says 10 fingers are there, 10 toes are there, full digestive system is there, full capacity to think and see and touch and taste is there, Full capacity to breathe is there. First thing a child does, take its first breath. The inward capacity for cells to be repaired and for growth to take place by itself, unaided, provided the environment is there, suitable environment is there, also provided. So knowing that, we have full potential. What is within us? The fullness of the Supreme, the fullness of what we call God, who is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. That fullness is there within us. And so this is how devotees free themselves and get emancipated. Contrary to this, the mind that delights in the mundane gets entangled. The mundane is not just the boredom. Mundane, we always think a job is mundane. You put it in the category of boring or routine, maybe. But mundane in the sense that down to earth, to the extent that earth is all we have. The observable universe and experience is all there is and all we have, and we operate within that framework and try and struggle to do the best and make the best of it. The atheistic position would be, materialist atheistic position would be something like that. They say, well, since this life has no profound purpose in it, I make my own purpose. And I make hay while the sun shines. If you make hay while the sun shines, you forgot that at night it doesn't shine. Then what will you do? So inevitable, there's a struggle to try to be happy. And if you had succeeded, then the effort to succeed would not be there. So it's a continuous effort. Now the constancy of the yogi has to be expatiated on. And so it's no good cultivating this in an erratic way. There has to be some steadiness going on. So far, no mention of sit down, close your eyes, and think, or do not think, meditate, and so on and so forth, or do pranayama. None of this is put forward as yet. So that yogi who is steadfast, who is satisfied with knowledge and wisdom, who remains unshaken, who has conquered the senses, to whom a clod, a stone, and a piece of gold are exactly the same. Some mention of this was said in the previous chapter. The Brahmana and a Chandala will be the same, and so on. The Bhagavatam also says it very, very clearly. See, the dog and the dog eater and all of this, but all equal, all the same. If that is seen, then you're quite right. We can't classify people into friends, enemies, etc. So let's see. And this will be the last stanza for this evening. Jnana vijnana triptatma kutasto vijitendriya yukta iti uchate yogi samalostasma kanchanaha. See, jnana vijnana. The yogi is steadfast, the satisfied with knowledge and wisdom, who remains unshaken. Nothing more to know, satisfied fully, and therefore not shaken by any what we classify previously as unfortunate events, unsettling events. He remains unshaken in it. He has conquered the senses and has a vision of equality everywhere. See how Ramakrishna took literally this clod of earth and money and said, threw them both into the Ganga. Worldly people are those who seek after the impermanent things of the earth. Godly people are those who seek God and nothing else. Now imagine, some people will say that's such a radical statement. Think of God and nothing else. But there's nothing else available. We interpret everything as the mundane, the material, this life and so on, these problems, these difficulties. But our philosophy says, no, it's only God. Therefore, it should be very easy to fix your mind. So many say the final conclusion in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is this one beautiful statement: fix your mind on me. How can we do that? It's only because we make the separation. Mind and God, body and God, world and God, occupation and worship. All classifying as different. This is our foolishness. Do we believe in reincarnation? Yes, of foolishness. Om Shanti, 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 Shanti.
Swamiji,